So, on your road to marriage, we're going to talk a little bit about conflict resolution. So, conflict resolution in itself, from a relationship standpoint, is often difficult for some, actually, for most people, especially from a relationship standpoint, because in a relationship is more intimate, more personal. Then it also depends on a lot of different factors as well. Subject matter, it has a lot to do with why certain conversations go left. Depending on the subject matter, it depends on like your mood that day, whether you had a stressful day, whether you have a lot going on in your life. Also, just a lot of different other factors that go along with that. But when we talk about resolving conflict in relationships, you want to make sure that you give that conversation the best opportunity to remain a conversation. And that's the biggest thing, is allowing a conversation to remain constructive enough for you both to kind of get through that conversation in a way that seems like both parties have been heard, both parties have been seen, and then allowing both parties to validate the other person's opinion and feelings. Because what you don't want to do is enter into a conversation and feel like that conversation was a waste of time, basically. Which means that your feelings were completely disregarded, your feelings weren't considered, and it seems like that conversation, it just didn't go anywhere. And that's what you don't want to feel with your partner. So some best practices here is to make sure that timing is everything when it comes to specific conversations. I mean, it may not be all conversations, but when you have something that is critically important to you, and you know that this subject matter may bring up some mixed feelings, may bring up some things that may cause things to go left, make sure that both parties are picking the right time to have that conversation. That conversation doesn't need to be sprung up on anyone, like at work or like while they're driving or while they're doing something else, because you want to make sure that you have a person's undivided attention, like undivided attention, so that both parties have an opportunity to be understood in that moment. Second thing, you want to make sure that that first 3 minutes of that conversation has a lot of positive verbiage in that first 3 minutes, because what you don't want to do is start that conversation off with blame, right? Or ridicule or contempt. Like just blaming that person for the reason why you feel the way that you do. That's something that you don't want to do, because of the fact that a person is going to get defensive, right? And that defeats your overall goal of feeling heard and feeling seen and feeling like that person understands where you're coming from. Because when that person gets defensive, they're not listening anymore. Like that conversation is no longer a conversation anymore. It's pretty much an argument. Like both parties are gonna start defending their position, and they're gonna start talking about why they felt the way that they do in that moment, right? And that's something that back and forth thing. That's something that you want to try to avoid, because of the fact that at that moment, all you want as a goal is to feel heard and seen, right? And have that feeling, the feeling that you're feeling at that moment, at least acknowledged, right? At least validated to a certain degree, that that person understands why you feel the way that you do, right? So in that first 3 minutes, you want to use a lot of I statements like I feel this way, I feel sad, I feel happy, I feel angry. But you also want to talk about the situation and not the person, right? Like in your I statements, you want to talk about the situation in general, right? The reason why you feel the way that you do, but not directly your partner, right? You don't want to talk directly or speak directly to your partner in a way that is blame, right? And again, this could be related to something that they did, but in that moment, we're talking about the situation and how the situation made you feel. And that's what you want to kind of put into your I statement, which is how the situation made you feel, right? And And again, in those moments, it's okay to use positive verbiage. It's okay to use words on the back end of that. So if you feel sad, it's okay for you to say you feel sad, right? There's nothing wrong with that. And what I mean by positive verbiage in that moment is just not directly speaking to your partner, right? Like not directly blaming that person. That's the part that I want to just kind of clarify to make sure that we understand that you don't want to just use like direct blame towards your partner. If you feel sad, if you feel angry, it's okay for you to feel that way, right? It's nothing wrong with that. And that's not necessarily saying that you shouldn't say that. You should say that because that's your feeling. Like you should say that. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Um, so the third thing, though, right, is you want to make sure that both parties have an opportunity to actually like talk about that subject matter and that feeling that they also have, but you want to do it in a way that is constructive, right? So which means is you want to make sure that both parties have their opportunity to speak on that subject matter, but you want to make sure that both parties have their window of time to talk, which is don't cut them off, don't interject in their statement, don't do any of those things, because what you don't want to do is make a person feel rushed or make a person feel like you're not listening and you just want to get to your part of it or whatever the case may be. So allow your partner to speak 100%, like all the way through to their point, their feelings, and then leave space for empathy, right? Like leave space for acknowledgement of their hurt, their pain, their happiness, whatever that emotion is. Leave space for you to come in and at least acknowledge it, right? And acknowledgement and validation does not mean that you 100% agree, right? That's not what that means. That means that you are basically speaking to that moment and you're reassuring your partner that you're there with them in that moment. Like you understand where they're coming from, right? Like you're telling them that you're there with them in that moment, and that's important in those critical moments of conflict resolution. Is having at least that mutual understanding that you're present, you're there with them, right? So on your road to marriage, you want to make sure that you're setting the stage for conflict to be resolved, right? Because your goal is to make sure that you seek understanding first, which is allowing the conversation to go to a point where at least there's a baseline of understanding between both parties, right? Solution is not nowhere in the picture yet, right? Because if you don't have a general understanding of why your partner feels the way that they do, it's really difficult to create an accurate solution for something that you clearly don't understand, right? So seeking understanding first, right, is going to be your best bet, right? So if you get to a point where the conversation is getting heated, right? Because some conversations do get heated. It's okay to take a break, right? It's okay for both parties to kind of back up from that subject and take a break. Now the issue with taking a break though is both parties have to agree to a break, right? And then they have to set a time frame for revisiting the conversation. So if we're gonna take a break, just say, hey, can we take this break? Give me about 20 minutes, give me 40 minutes, whatever the case may be. Both people in that break period, both parties need to be like, they need to go, maybe outside or just to a separate room. And in that moment, you need to separate yourself from that issue, which is that subject matter. So that means that if you can watch a sitcom, if you can listen to some music, if you can just go for a walk and clear your head, whatever you need to do, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But you want to kind of remove yourself mentally and physically from that situation so that you can have space to reset. Like reset your mood, reset how you're feeling, so that when that 2-hour window is up or that 45-minute window is up, you can come back to the table and you can be level, you can be calm, and then you can try to revisit that conversation again, right? So that's the biggest premise there, is that it's okay to, put a little break in there. It's okay to put a little pause in there to actually kind of reset yourself and come back to it, or whatever the case may be. But what you don't want to do is sweep that conversation under the rug and just not touch it anymore to begin with. Because what you have to understand is that that conversation, that subject matter, it didn't go away. Like, it just didn't magically just get resolved. It's still going to be there. And what's going to happen is it's going to be there in your future conversations that have absolutely nothing to do with that conversation. It's going to get brought back into that as an add-on, right? As an addition to whatever that subject matter you're talking about. So that means that if you're arguing about taking out the trash, you're going to have a conversation about taking out the trash plus the two conversations, or the one conversation that you didn't resolve before. And that's something that you don't want, right? So that means that you want to make sure that you try your best to seek understanding, have that full understanding, and then work towards whatever solution, or whatever thing that needs to be said or done to make sure that that conversation is resolved to both parties' satisfaction, and so that you guys can both kind of move forward. So that's only kind of part of a lot of the conflict resolution stages. But in the beginning of any type of conflict resolution, especially from a relationship standpoint, you want to make sure that you set the proper playing field for proper communication between you and that person. Because at the end of the day, you love that person, you want to be with that person, you want that person to continue to come talk to you about anything first and foremost. So make sure that you are creating that environment for two-way communication in that safe place, so that both parties have the opportunity to speak their piece and be able to continue to build the relationship that you both want.